Meantime, I want you to take a look at this new issue of Business Week magazine. The cover story is full of analysts telling you how bad the real estate market is. Now, one of those guys is here. Peter Schiff is the president of Euro Pacific Capital. He joins me now from Stanford. I read through the article, and there were some upbeat people there. You were not among the upbeat people, but I don't know what an article like this fosters without some balance. And that's what I'm worried about, Peter. There's just virtually no balance.
I read the article, and I didn't think there was enough bearishness in it. You know, I mean, sure, it's a bleak situation. I mean, there is no silver lining here. But unfortunately, it's far bleaker than even that article lets on.
Well, that article talks about declines of 60, 70, 80% in some markets from these levels. That article goes on to talk about whole towns, cities, communities wiped out, about a multi-decade funk from which we might not recover. So you concur
that's
with
happening?
That?
Sure, and of course, you remember, I wrote about this 3 years ago. I mean, there's a lot of articles that I'm seeing right now that literally, they could have been ripped off my website, 3 or 4 years ago.
So what do you see happening now, Peter? What would give you pause, young man, is the fact that now the media is agreeing with you. You think you'd run the other way.
No. They still don't think it's as bad as it is. Because first of all, there's no solution to the housing mess without a dramatic reduction in home prices. Okay, that has to happen.
What's dramatic?
Well, I mean, look at how much home prices have gone up in the last 6 or 7 years. In many parts of the country, they doubled and tripled. And this is just unsustainable. These prices were fantasy prices that only existed because of the rampant speculation. What do they have to do now? Well, they have to allow prices to go down because no one's going to want to lend on this collateral, and people are going to lose a lot of home equity. Americans are going to have to come to terms with their financial reality. They've been living in a fantasy world.
Okay, Peter, I agree, but I'm sorry I have the attention span of a gnat. How much? What are you saying? What kind of a decline are you looking at from these levels?
Well, all the markets are different, but I think from the peak, whatever the peak was in the bubble markets, like in California, Nevada, and Florida, you're going to see general home prices down by about 50%, and you're going to see homes selling in foreclosures at distressed prices of maybe 60, 70% off or more. Certainly the rest of the country, places like Des Moines, Iowa, I mean, I don't really know all the markets in the middle of the country, but they're not going to see declines anywhere near as dramatic because they didn't see run-ups like that.
Do you own or rent right now, Peter?
I rent. I rent my house in Connecticut. I'm renting one in Florida. In fact, I'm moving into another rental house because if you look at the rental markets, if you look at what I'm paying in rent, I barely cover my landlord's property taxes with my rent, let alone, what his mortgage is or what his maintenance is. I mean, renting is still a much better deal because remember, people who were buying homes were speculating. They were willing to pay 40, 50% of their monthly income on the fantasy that houses were golden gooses that would keep laying these eggs, and people didn't look at them as money pits. People thought they were going to add to their income, not subtract from it. So we have a whole economy, remember, that was based on all this excess consumption that was financed by home equity, either through the wealth effect or through home equity extractions. That economy is going to come to an end.
Okay, for people who can't get enough of your cockeyed, optimistic view of the world, Peter, there's more to come. But to be fair to you, my friend, you have been predicting a lot of the stuff we see passing. More with Peter Schiff, and then this. Play. Not going along with Hillary Clinton's health care plan? Well, better watch out, because if she becomes president, she just might garnish your wages. Under Hillary care, it's play or pay. She says to keep everyone's costs down. Others are not so sure. Reaction now from Jonathan Hoenig, Daniel Fishberg, and Peter Schiff. Daniel, what do you think of this play or pay solution?
Well, she's going to have to do something to take the money from you because lots of people don't have health insurance because they don't want it. They choose not to have it. And so the only way you're going to be able to do it, according to her plan, is going to be to force them to pay.
She says everyone's got to get on board, Jonathan Hoenig, or everyone's going to pay more anyway. So tough medicine early on is the way for good, affordable medicine afterwards. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, Neil. Violating people's rights now, does that supposedly help them somewhere along down the line? I mean, yeah, Hillary's plan is basically health care by coercion, forcing you to participate, dictating that care. And I guess, yes, if you want a health care system that's run like Amtrak or the Post Office or Social Security, get on board with Hillary. But I think it's a disaster in the making. Not only is it impractical, but it's terribly immoral as well. This whole notion that health care is somehow a right that Hillary and Obama and even Mitt Romney to some extent is on board with, I just think it's exactly the wrong direction for this country to be moving in.
You know, Peter, I'm looking at your predictions for the economy and with only medicine after hearing you, and I'm thinking now with Hillary Care, if we don't go along with her plan, it's going to cost us more for the privilege. What do you think?
Well, you know, of course, as usual, Jonathan is 100% right. You know, the problem with health care is we have too much government involvement. The last thing we need is more government. You know, if we really want to bring health care costs down, we need to get the government out of it so the free market can drive the costs down. Governments don't drive costs down. Look at what they've done to education. I mean, anywhere the government gets involved, you get higher prices. And if we could let the market bring health care costs down, we wouldn't need all this insurance. The problem is many Americans are overinsured. The only insurance people really need should be for catastrophic problems. Everyday health care costs should be paid for out of pocket, and we could afford it if the government wasn't in there driving costs up.
You know, that's a very good point. But let me, guys, this is the reality here. And the one thing that Hillary Clinton has been very consistent on and very definitive on is this idea of insuring everyone. Dan Frischberg, will that work? That the only way this can work, universal health care, is it to be universal, everybody?
Well, you know, you can lower the price of movies if you split everybody up and make them go to the movies they don't want instead of crowding everybody into the good ones. And you could lower the price of food if you make people go to the pizza place across the street instead of the nice steakhouse. The whole thing about this country is we choose what we want to do. And socialized medicine places really don't have to have gates to keep people out. They have to keep people in.
And Neil,
go ahead, John.
And Neil, I was just going to say, I mean, look at the end result. I mean, those places in the world where there socialized medicine does exist, 9 times out of 10, those who have that coverage end up coming to the States anyway, especially for critical medical care. So unfortunately, I think that this panacea, this utopia that Hillary sees, where everyone gets the best care under the sun under her socialized health care plan, it simply is never going to work.
And of course, they ignore the reality that the country is going broke. We can't afford to spend more money on health care. I mean, we're already borrowing so much money as it is from the Chinese and from the Saudis. I mean, where do you think these sovereign wealth funds are coming? Where are they getting all the money to buy our assets out from under us? It's because of all this excess government spending and individual spending. Why do we need more deficit spending to finance health care and then destroy our dollar?
So, Peter, by your definition, do things get worse faster under President Hillary Clinton or, let's say, a President John McCain?
Well, they're going to get pretty bad, and under either president. If you want anybody in office who's going to help the situation, then you got to vote for Ron Paul tomorrow, because he's the only Republican who has a shot of getting elected.
Don't you? You love Ron Paul.
Well, you ought to vote for him.
You're a contributor, right? You're a contributor.
I contributed to him. I'm actually officially one of his economic advisors. You know, and ironically,
he's the only cockeyed, optimistic team.
He's the only candidate in the race who doesn't need any economic advice. He should be advising all the other candidates.
Well, he is a smart guy, as are you, Peter. Daniel, Jonathan, I want to thank you all as well. We'll see what happens. All right, well.